All right, so our second day on lesson 4 here in our third part of our unit 6 when we are graphing our quadratic functions. So we're going to take all those characteristics that we learned yesterday and we're going to see if we can find all of those things from a single graph or all of those things from a single equation. This is going to really lead you into the second half of the unit where we are graphing from scratch using these characteristics. So that's going to be our plan for today. It's all the same things that we did yesterday, but it's putting them all together on the same problem. So just as a warm-up, usually the most difficult part of that whole process is finding the zeros. So just to help you warm up here, just find the zeros for these two equations. Pause your video and see if you can do it. All right, so remember that finding the zeros are the solutions when y equals 0, right? They're where we cross the x-axis, and that happens when y equals 0. So the first step is to plug in 0 for y. So I have 0 equals x plus 1 squared minus 4. All right, now, instead of doing any bin squared or foiling, I'm going to get that squared by itself. So I'm going to add 4 to both sides. All right, so I have 4 equals, in my parentheses, I have x plus 1 squared. Now, whatever is squared is all alone, so I can square root both sides now. Square root and squared cancel out. I'm just going to switch the order a little bit, so I'll get x plus 1 equals, and remember, the square root of 4 is 2 or negative 2. Don't forget the plus or minus. After you write the square root, the next step has plus or minus on it. 2 times 2 equals 4. Negative 2 times negative 2 also equals 4. So don't forget your plus or minus here, right? I'm not done yet, though. I still need to subtract 1 from both of my options, and that's, again, why I usually write my plus and minus next to each other in a problem like this, because I know I have another step. So 2 minus 1 is 1. Negative 2 minus 1 is negative 3. So my two zeros here would be the points at 1 and negative 3, or in other words, the points 1, 0 and negative 3, 0. However you want to write it, both ways are correct. Okay. Part B, same idea. Set it equal to 0 to start with. Y equals 0, I should say. All right, get whatever is squared by itself on this one. Since I don't have a plain x term, I can subtract 49 from both sides. I get negative 49 equals x squared. Square root both sides. Oh boy. I have the square root of a negative number. That's a no solution. And remember, that's okay, right? All that means is that I have my graph here and my parabola is opening up when my vertex is already above the x-axis. I guess I do know that my vertex here is right on the y-axis, so it looks like this, right? So it's okay if you get a no solution for zeros. That happens. So don't forget that that's an okay response. If you look at the first one, if I picture my graph for this one, this would mean my parabola was something like this, right? Where I have a point here at 1 and a point here at negative 3. So it would be touching in 2 places. All right, quick review of the hardest parts, I think, from yesterday. So now let's take a look at putting all the pieces together. So here's a graph, and I'm going to find all the things we talked about yesterday from this same graph. So the first thing they're asking us for is the vertex. So here I can find that turning point, and it looks like my coordinates of my vertex would be negative 1, 4. Hopefully it's pretty easy to pick out from the graph. Next one says, is it a maximum or a minimum? Well, I can see that my parabola is opening down, so I would have a maximum. And my maximum value, right, is how high does it actually get? And my maximum would be at y equals 4, or just 4, however you want to say that. But that's that maximum value, is how high or low does it get? All right, the next thing is my axis of symmetry. So remember, that's that vertical line that goes through the vertex. that vertical line through the vertex.
I couldn't hear.
Sorry about that. There we go. And the equation of a vertical line is x equals a number, right? And in this case, the number would be -1. It's also the x coordinate of my vertex. X equals -1. You can see that we use the numbers from our vertex in two places. I obviously use my x coordinate right here for my axis of symmetry, but I also use the y coordinate to see my maximum or minimum, right? So finding the vertex, not only does it really help us picture our graph and where is that turning point, right? But it also really helps us pick out a lot more information, that maximum or minimum value, as well as the axis of symmetry. So finding the vertex is a really important thing to do, whether I'm using my equation or my graph. All right, next thing says to find the zeros. So remember the zeros, those are the points where it crosses the x-axis. So my zeros here are -3 and 1. Or we could say -3, 0, and 1, 0, either way. All right. And finally, it's asking us for the y-intercept. Again, the y-intercept is where it crosses the y-axis, and that looks like the y-intercept is 3. Or I could write it as the point 0, 3. All right. So looking at the graph, it's really easy to find all of those things. And hopefully you're starting to see the flip side of it. If I knew all of those things, it would be really easy to make a really accurate graph of my parabola as well. If I knew the two zeros, I could put those points on there. If I knew the vertex, well, that's my turning point. If I know my axis of symmetry, that means that any points I have on one side would be reflected on the other. So I could even get another point by reflecting that y-intercept onto the other side of that axis of symmetry. Now look at all those points. You should be able to draw that parabola really quickly and easily just by finding those. That's where we're heading in the next part of the unit. But first, let's make sure we can do all of those things from just looking at the equation instead of the graph. It is more complicated when all you have is the equation, so let's make sure we can do it. All right, first of all, it says, where is the vertex? Now, it's not as easy as just picking that point out, but remember, we use our transformations. So when I am adding or subtracting inside the parentheses, that moves me left or right. So when I'm subtracting inside the parentheses, that means that I have moved right 2 units, right? -2 is right 2 when it's inside the parentheses. Okay, and then adding 18 at the end means that I'm moving up 18. So my vertex would be right 2 would be +2, and up 18 would be +18. So my vertex would be the point 2, 18. All right, now let's see, maximum or minimum. Remember, I'm looking for the reflection. I do see that it's multiplied by a negative, so there is a reflection. Since I have a reflection, that means that my parabola opens down. And when my parabola opens down, I have a maximum value. All right, so my maximum value, and remember that I look at my vertex, right? I'm looking for how far did it go up or down? Well, I'm looking right here at my y coordinate of my vertex, so my maximum value is at y equals 18. All right, the axis of symmetry also uses the vertex, right? My axis of symmetry is that vertical line that goes through the vertex, so it has to be x equals the x coordinate of the vertex. So x equals 2 is my axis of symmetry. Okay, so it all comes down to that vertex for those first few, and use those transformations, right? Where is it moving left or right? Where is it moving up or down? And did it have a reflection or not? All right, now the other two come from the equation. How do I find the zeros? So remember, the zeros are the points where y equals 0, right? So I take my equation, I set y equal to 0. So 0 equals -2, parentheses, x minus 2 squared plus 18. And I just start solving away. I'm going to move the 18 first. Get -18 equals -2 times x minus 2 squared. All right, I'm going to divide both sides by -2 because my x squared is not alone yet. Oops. So I will get positive 9 equals x minus 2 squared. Now I have my squared by itself, so I can square root both sides. Squared and square root cancel. I'm running out of room. So I get x minus 2 equals 3 or -3. Don't forget about your plus or minus here. All right. Now I need to add 2 to both of my options, and then I will know my zeros. So if 3 plus 2 is 5, -3 plus 2 is -1. So my zeros are at 5 and -1. Or you could write that as 5, 0, and -1, 0. Okay, so finding the zeros is when you plug y equals 0 into your equation, right? All right, now the y-intercept is when x equals 0. That's when I cross the y-axis, right? So I take my equation and I keep the y this time, but I plug in 0 for x. And now I just solve using my order of operations. So let's see, I've got y equals -2 times, let's see, 0 minus 2 is -2 squared plus 18. Watch those parentheses. Exponents next, so I have y equals -2 times positive 4, right? -2 squared is positive 4. Now I'm going to multiply. Y equals -8 plus 18. -8 plus 18 equals 10. So my y-intercept is at 10, or I could write it as the point 0, 10 if I want to. So we can do all those things from a single equation. We're starting to put the puzzle pieces together. So if I find all of those, hopefully you're starting to see how you could really create a graph really quickly. That's the idea here. But for now, our focus is just on finding those things. All right, so just kind of the same wrap up as yesterday in case you need a refresher on how to find each of those different things. But hopefully you're getting more and more comfortable with that. Remember, it's okay if you have a no solution for zeros. That can happen. So don't freak out if you do.